Welcome to Case Files of the Geek Gumshoe. I'm the Geek Gumshoe. This case file comes to us from sunny California, where everything is bright and beautiful, or so the postcards would have us to believe. We're going to go over a little background and then look into the case of the death of Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. This case has been the subject of a lot of speculation, mostly based on the fact that it's been over-evaluated by a steady stream of amateurs. It has been thrown to the court of public opinion and dissected to the point of creating a culture of ignorance-based supposition and even generated venomous attacks on innocent people. I'm looking at you trolls who to this day continue attacking, bullying, and accusing Pablo Vergara of murder. Let's face it, a lot of you so-called internet sleuths think you're a bunch of hard-boiled detectives, when in reality, you're nothing but a bunch of soft-boiled couch potatoes. The most common and grievously frustrating error that I see throughout threads on this event is the tendency to make judgment with no basis in actual investigative method. You cannot approach an investigation from the standpoint of comparing and limiting the evidence to your own personal scope of reference. Lots of commenters make statements like, "This must be why she's doing this, because I've never seen anybody do it for any other reason." Well, given that you're 17 years old and the essence of your life experience is your job as a pizza delivery driver, maybe rein in your high horse just a little bit there, Jethro. This is why professional investigators attend hundreds of hours of training and work under other trained investigators, because it takes experience to determine why people do the weird things they do. Don't get me wrong, there's some great contributions made by internet sleuths, but even that information has to be vetted and investigated by professionals before it can be used as an indictment against an individual. We have a few things to address in this case, so let's rip the seal off and get into this case file. First of all, let's evaluate the idea of a supernatural theory, something called the elevator game. This is a ritualistic game that originated out of Japan, in which you enter an elevator and follow a preordained group of steps by pressing a combination of buttons for floors and then ride those floors before arriving at an alternate dimension. People have speculated that Elisa was playing this game and it resulted in her death. There's even a really cool song and video about it by the artist Skinned. However, this concept falls apart because of the fact that the elevator never leaves the floor that she's on. In fact, the doors never even close on her while she's in the elevator. This one should have been thrown out before it even got off the ground. Turns out a lot of people don't have a sense of humor about you playing the elevator game when they're on the elevator with you. It's pointless or childish. Stupid hotel manager. Second, let's address the murder cover-up theories. To do that, we need to understand two things: purpose of a cover-up and the location. To necessitate a cover-up, someone has to benefit. And therein is the first question an investigator has to ask. Who would benefit by covering up a murder? A cover-up would imply that one of the most observed and scrutinized departments in the world felt the need to hide a murder at the Cecil Hotel. Let's face it, the Cecil Hotel is a flophouse. The former manager admitted people die there all the time. We aren't talking about the Ritz-Carlton. There isn't enough money or influence coming through that place to justify LAPD covering up anything that happens there. In fact, I guarantee that any beat cop that works that area will tell you the best thing for that place is a wrecking ball. It certainly wouldn't take long to get tired of responding to the shenanigans that are going on in that place on any given day. Sure, they designated a few floors of this flop house as a fancier flop house for hipsters, but that's the equivalent of polishing a turd and then stopping after you polish the tip. Point is, there is nothing to be gained by the LAPD covering up a murder at the Cecil, and that's most likely not the case of what's going on here. Now, there's a handful of thoughts that come to my mind as an investigator that point towards this being an accidental death and not a murder of any kind. The first is the autopsy shows nothing consistent with a murder. Now, more than anything in an investigation, I will trust the autopsy, the word of a medical examiner, a trained professional whose job and credibility is on the line with every report that they file. According to the autopsy, multiple medications for depression were found in her system, and trace amounts of alcohol were found in a bile specimen. Now, while there was no alcohol found in her blood, that's not unusual, especially for a death that occurred 3 weeks prior to the discovery of the body. Alcohol does not stay in the blood system for very long, even in a dead body. Now, given that she was submerged that entire time, any evidence of alcohol in her system would have been gone by the time she was found. The second thing is, this is an overly complicated way to dispose of a body. There are simply too many opportunities for something to go wrong or for somebody to be exposed in the process of trying to get rid of it. Why not just throw the body off the roof or leave her in her room? After all, as we mentioned before, people die there all the time. The hotel is in the middle of Skid Row. Someone jumping off the roof of the building is not a far-fetched thought. If I'm a killer, I'm certainly not going to drag somebody all the way to the roof of the building, climb on top of a water tower, and throw their body in it, especially if I know that water tower is where I'm getting my water from. And thirdly, there is absolutely nothing in this video to suggest that she was being followed or pursued. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but let's talk about that a little bit. So on the video, we see Elisa getting on the elevator and then punching a bunch of buttons. Now, as you'll notice, she puts her face right up against the buttons as if she's having a hard time seeing them. This is not inconsistent with someone who's intoxicated. Now, what I believe we're observing here is someone with an illness known as dual diagnosis. That means that they've got a mental illness, and which in this case, we know that Elisa was suffering from a couple of different kinds of mental illness, according to statements made by her family and her friend. Also, antidepressant and antipsychotic drugs were found in her hotel room. Now, the case of dual diagnosis means, on top of the fact that she's suffering from some form of mental disorder, she's also self-medicating with alcohol and or drugs. Given that in the autopsy, illegal drugs were not found, my thought is that on the evening in question, she had been out drinking. She put alcohol on top of her antidepressants, and it also appeared that she was having some kind of a psychotic break. So after she pushes the buttons, you notice that her body language does not indicate that there's anything really going on around her to be concerned about. She's simply standing there. And then she does this. She leans forward and looks out, and then she starts acting a little goofy. She leans against the wall, then tucks into the corner. And this is where the internet began to lose its mind. Obviously, she's hiding from something. Obviously, she's scared by something. Lots of people were sharing this video and offering their conclusions that she must have been being followed. So she steps out of the elevator, looks around. She's taking very odd steps. Once again, this is consistent with being intoxicated. She steps off the elevator and then disappears from sight. Then she looks back in, steps in. Did you see what she just did where she was touching the top of her head? Once again, that's another move very consistent with somebody who's under the influence. Now she goes back on and starts pushing more buttons. The hand gestures here, once again, are very consistent with someone who's under the influence. She's continuing to stand outside the elevator, which tells me she's not terribly concerned about anything that's going on in the hallway. She's not stepping back in, trying to hide. And then she disappears from view. Now, Elisa's actions on the elevator created a lot of speculation. People were trying to figure out exactly what was going on with her. Why was she acting this way? Who was she hiding from? When she's ducked back against the wall, she's clearly scared and she's hiding from someone. I don't see that in this case. I don't see someone who is in fear. What I see is someone who is confused. I do believe that the addition of alcohol into her system on this particular evening created a very confusing and difficult situation for her to figure out. But I also believe that there's something perfectly innocent happening here. Let me tell you exactly what I see going on here. So going back through the video, once again, we see Elisa get on, and in a very childlike way, consistent with being intoxicated, she starts pushing buttons. We know from evaluating pictures of the elevator button pad that she is on the 14th floor when this video starts. She punches a number of buttons, including one to hold the door. In the case of the elevator at the Cecil Hotel, it was revealed that the hold door button causes the elevator to stay open for about 2.5 minutes. This is where her confusion starts. So now she's wondering, why aren't the doors closing? So she's leaning out to see if there's something going on. Did someone push a button? Now she leans against the wall, and everyone in the world thinks she's hiding from something. She is hiding from something, but she's not hiding from a monster or a ghost or a serial killer. What she's hiding from is the electric eye of the elevator. She backs up against the wall because she can't figure out why the door won't close. She doesn't realize that the door open button has got the door locked open for the next 2 minutes. She backs up against the wall, because she thinks she's triggering the electric eye that holds the doors open. Now, when she ducks into the corner, she still doesn't appear to be in any kind of fear or distress. She's simply ducking deeper into another corner to get away from that electric eye. She's very confused as to why that elevator door is not closing. And the only thing that she can think of is that she's standing in such a way that it's triggering the electric eye on the elevator. And she is quite simply and quite innocently hiding from that electric eye. Let that sink in and think about it for just a minute. I know a lot of people don't want to believe this. People love the sensationalism of something like a serial killer or a supernatural being stalking this young lady. That's just not the case. Her body language doesn't show fear. Her body language shows confusion. And I know a lot of people are going to go away thinking, he doesn't know what he's talking about. She's clearly scared. And that's fine. That's an opinion. But from someone who has been around intoxicated people, from someone who has been around people with dual diagnosis issues, what I see in her conduct here is someone whose brain is fogged by mental illness and by alcohol consumption, and she is extremely disoriented. Now, what I would like to see is the video of how she got to the 14th floor in the first place. Where's the video of her entering the hotel that evening? Where's the video of her in the hotel going upstairs and getting off that elevator and going to that floor? I don't know. If we could observe her in that situation, I do think that it would dispel a lot of the speculation about this situation. Now let's circle back to something we talked about earlier and the idea of a cover-up. Now I know that a lot of people believe that there's a clip missing from this video. Right here, where the elevator door starts to close, the door suddenly jumps out and it looks like there's video missing. Some people have also said that the blurred timescale at the bottom of the screen appears to jump in time. Now I can't speak to that. I don't have the original video. I haven't looked at it and I can't tell. But here's what I think is most likely the scenario of why that video clip would be missing. Whenever something like this is released to the public, there are certain things that have to be protected, such as the identity of other guests in the hotel. If there is video missing at this point, I believe it's probably because someone else walked by the door to the elevator at that time. It would be irresponsible of the LAPD to release video showing someone who could possibly be identified walking past, given that at the point that this video was originally released, they did not realize that this young lady was dead. She was simply missing. So it definitely would have been irresponsible to show the face of another guest at the hotel to the general public. That being said, you might ask, well, why didn't they release those images after? And there's a perfectly good explanation for that. This case was not a homicide. It was not an unsolved murder. Once the investigation of this case was concluded, her death was determined to be an accident. There was no reason to release additional footage. And also, having seen the public's reaction to the video when it was first released, it would have been extremely irresponsible now to release video that showed another person walking by. Can you imagine how the general public would have responded to that? If that video exists, to this day, if they were to release that, there would be people accusing that person of the death of Elisa Lam. I don't believe there's anything sinister here. I think everything has an answer that makes sense if you want it to make sense. Now, I have no evidence of any of this. This is simply an observation made by someone with the background in investigation, looking at this video without any inclination towards sensationalism. At the end of the day, the death of Elisa Lam is a tragic and sad story of someone with mental health issues whose death has been fodder for more speculation than it should be. And I doubt that my assertions will change much of that, as there will always be people who refuse to listen to evidence and still find the need to live their own adventure vicariously through this incident. If you agree with my theories, please leave a comment. If you don't, I'd love to hear your respectful debate. Also, if you have videos, photos, or a story that I need to turn my eye to, leave it in the comments below or email me at geek.gumshoe@gmail.com. So until the next case brings our paths together, keep your mind and eyes open, but don't be an easy mark. Geek Gumshoe, over and out.